And Harvard University, as I was saying, would be a place where you do have a lot of Aristotelian thought, but then blended with some Reformation stuff, which we'll look at later. But Aristotle is really important in the educational methods that evolve out of the Middle Ages. And Plato will eventually become important as well, as he's rediscovered after the Crusades, where the Muslims have been keeping the philosophy of Plato alive, surprisingly. And we'll get to all that when we get to the Dark Ages and the High Middle Ages and the Renaissance. It'll be pretty important. These are philosophers. Here you see the three good-looking gentlemen. The gentleman here, this is Socrates, this is Plato, and then this is Aristotle, supposedly what they would have looked like. And here, if you want to pause and read some of the things from their different writings, here the Phaedrus is Plato, okay? And here are two dialogues from a writing of Plato in which he writes of things Socrates would have said about the Athenians. So it's pretty interesting to read through these. If you get a chance, please try to give those a look. And if any of you are interested in going into liberal arts, you will read many ideas from the Greek philosophers. So you can ask me some questions in class about the philosophers if you want any more clarification. Now let's get to one of my favorite time periods in Greece, and this is the birth of Greek drama. Anything you watch on TV, any movie you watch, anything Shakespeare ever did, all of it has its birth in Greece, in the birth of drama, okay? And when you think of drama, you can think about plays. Everybody's probably been to a play. If you've never been to one, Fian has them. You can go see them there. Most plays, their initial ideas have their origins in ancient Greece. And playwriting revolves out of religious festivals. Every springtime, they'd have a big festival across Greece to the god of wine and harvest, Dionysus. And he's got a fertility also. And they'd have these big celebrations. And in the celebrations, people be drinking wine, having a good time. And there's no TV or movies. They want to be entertained. So some people would write plays, which would be about the gods, about the great myths of ancient Greece. And these playwrights would compete. And then at the end of the festival, they'd vote to see who had the best plays, and the winning playwright would get some money and prestige. And so a lot of these plays come out of big competitions, okay? And like I said, earliest drama uses the myths and stories of ancient Greece that people would have known for years, again, all this oral tradition, and then they sprinkle in moral and social issues into these. And again, the Greek gods are reflected and all that. And that's pretty interesting. It's the people with familiar stories, and then all of a sudden they look around and go, wait a second, he's talking about us today. He's not talking about the Trojan War. Okay, he's talking about us today. He's not talking about the myth of the Minotaur. So the playwrights are really interesting, and all drama, for the most part in our society, usually has some kind of moral equivalency, or is some way, shape, or form of kind of showing us a mirror of our current societal situation. And as I said, you competed to see which play would be voted the best. And this competition, as competition usually leads to, is some really good playwrights emerging because the competition's so steep. And as I said, the winning playwright would receive money and accolades. So first things first, the Greeks are the first people to divide drama into two separate types. And you might get some blending nowadays, but most drama, TV shows, most of all this are developed and broken into two categories. These categories are tragedy, and then the next one we're going to talk about are comedies. Okay, so tragedies and comedies. The Greeks invented these, what we will call genres. Tragedies are plays that tell stories of human suffering. They often end in disaster, and in the Greek term, the whole idea is that no matter what you do, you cannot escape fate. Fate catches up to us all. Okay? Your first real great tragedian, we would call him, or a tragedy writer, is Aeschylus. Okay? And most of your tragedy writers would write their plays in threes. You'd write three plays that would all kind of deal, like trilogies, basically, that would all kind of deal with the same situation. And his most famous one is the Orestia. And this all deals with, again, taking mythical ideas of King Agamemnon, who was the mythical leader of the Trojan War for the Greeks, and having him come home to Greece and deal with murder, betrayal, and all that kind of stuff. And so Agamemnon deals with, he comes home, his wife has been cheating on him, she and her lover kill him, and then the libation bearers deals with the children killing the wife and her lover, and people always die. And the big idea is that you can't escape your fate. It's very bloody. Another famous Greek tragedian is Sophocles, and he writes what are called the Theban plays: Antigone, Oedipus Rex, and Oedipus at Colonus. Okay, Oedipus Rex is the one we will look at. They all center around a king of Thebes and the fact that his house is cursed. And we'll talk more about this play a little bit in class, but it's one of your prime examples of true tragedy. I won't spoil the ending or what it's really all about. Some of you may know, but it is definitely a tragic play. And the last guy I want to talk about is somebody who, when we look at the Peloponnesian War, we definitely can see tragedy as, or even all of drama, as social commentary. His name's Euripides, and he writes a famous play called The Trojan Women, in which he writes a whole play about how, after the end of the Trojan War, all of the Greeks slaughtered all the Trojan men and boys, and they sold the women into slavery. But he's not really talking about the Trojan Wars. He's writing this during the Peloponnesian War, making the Athenians see that, hey, maybe it was wrong to slaughter whole islands full of people. Maybe it was wrong to commit atrocities. So you would be watching the play going, oh, that's terrible that they killed all these people in Troy. And then all of a sudden what Euripides wanted you to think was, oh my God, that's us. And that's kind of what we see with drama even today. That's really what drama should do. It should entertain, but it should be a social commentary. Here you can read through some lines from some famous plays by these people, and you'll definitely get an idea that we call tragedy for a reason, and you still use the word tragic in your lives. And you can read through some of these. They're pretty interesting. On a lighter note, we should talk about the birth of comedy. Comedy has its origins in ancient Greece. Okay, it is used to make people laugh, to keep you entertained, but also to mock people and customs, to say, look at you're laughing at the play, that's you're laughing at, and you should stop acting that way. So a lot of times, even today, comedy is used for social comedy. The most famous writer of comedy is the great Greek comedic writer Aristophanes. Were there a lot of other comedic writers? Yeah, they probably were. We haven't found that many. But the guy we have a lot left that survived through the Roman Empire, the Dark Ages, all that, is Aristophanes. His most famous play is Lysistrata. It criticizes the Peloponnesian War by showing how the women of Athens all joined together to go on strike. They all leave the houses, and they go hide up in the Acropolis, and they go on strike, and the Spartan women do the same until all their husbands decide that fighting is silly and stupid, and they stop fighting. There's a little more to it. I can talk about it a little bit in class, but for the sake of time, just know that it's a really funny play because it's all the men trying to get the women back and that. But what is he really saying? War is silly. What really matters is family. What really matters is having a nice, easy, gentle life. And he uses you would have been laughing, and they would have been like, wait a second, look at ourselves. Look how stupid we are to be fighting. So again, commentary. And here we have some pretty funny lines from Aristophanes that you can read through that I kind of like. In particular, the last one. That's a pretty famous quote, and that is translated out of Greek. So stupid people have always existed. Give that a look. Last but not least, especially for us, one of the most great things that comes out of the great period of classical Greece is the true writing of history. The idea of history being that science, that social science that we know today. So the Greeks are the first people to apply observation, reason, and logic to historical study. Okay, everything we learned about in section 1 of chapter 1, this is it. The Greeks are the first people not to look at history as just record keeping. It's, hey, let's tell the story. How are we going to take all this data and tell a story? Your first great historian, the father of history, is Herodotus. As I've already kind of mentioned in your timelines you looked at, Herodotus, a few years after the Persian Wars, goes traveling around through Greece, through Persia, interviewing people who were in the wars. He compiles all that primary source material, and he writes a history he calls the Persian Wars. Again, collects primary sources, and a big thing he does is he notes people who he thinks are being biased and conflicting accounts, but in the end, though, his own pro-Greek view is seen. So we do see that he does know, like, hey, this guy doesn't like he's telling the truth. But he gets both sides, collects the data, and then tries to tell the story in a narrative. The other great historian is Thucydides, and I've told you about him. He writes a history of the Peloponnesian War that's contemporary. He was one of the Athenian generals in the war. And he even got ostracized when he lost the battle. And while he's ostracized, he's got all his time to write a contemporary view of the war. And again, he vividly describes the savagery, the killing. And most importantly, since he felt sold out by Athens, he makes sure he tells both sides equally. He avoids bias. He's very fair to both sides. He's like, hey, yeah, the Spartans killed a lot of Athenians, but we killed a lot of them too, a lot of innocent people. So that's pretty important. And here we see these two luminaries. Here we see Herodotus, and here we see Thucydides. And that's basically the big stuff I want you to know about Greek culture. We will talk a little bit about this in class before we look at a section of the play Oedipus Rex. And then we will be moving into ancient Rome. We're looking at a quiz towards the end of this week, or depending if you're watching it vacation week, the week after vacation week. So I look forward to seeing you all in class, and make sure you did read this section as well. And again, any questions you have about this, write them down, and I will answer as many as I can in class before we look at the Greek play, and then we start moving into chapter 6.